We all to the December 14th, 2017 Benicia Unified School District Board meeting. And we need to report out on student matters. So recommendation is to follow the recommended from the committee on student 18-001. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor say aye. Aye. What's that? It's still the same what was in the book. No, roll call was that. Yes. I wasn't. Okay. With that, I'd like to ask you all to please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We're going to move to the approval of the agenda, but we want to do a little switch here, or move. We want to, Betty, would you?
I move to approve the agenda as amended. I'll second that.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Highlights.
Very good. So good evening, trustees and everybody who's joined us this evening. We have a fun highlight this evening, and it's on the robotics program at the middle school. And this is something that I learned about last year. President Wing and I did. We attended this robotics competition at University Davis, and we were so jazzed about that, and the opportunity that this provides for students. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Nunes, who's one of our esteemed teachers over at the middle school, and she'll talk about the robotics program that she started at the middle school, and she has some students and a student to attest to that as well. So welcome. We love to hear about it.
Thank you. Good evening. Soretta Tuttle and I were excited to take on this robotics team for BMS. It's something new for both of us. So we joined the first Lego League and we set up a club. This year is kind of the beginning, rookie, learning the ropes. So I'm going to let our student Andy Hill tell you more from his experience of being in the club. But we're excited to have it and are looking forward to getting to the point where we can enter those kind of competitions that they went to.
Hello, my name is Andy Hill, and so far for the Robotics Club, everything has been going along really well. It's really fun. Just building the Legos, getting them all set up was a huge part, and it was really fun to see how fast we could build them. And we even had little competitions in the end, and the students, well, most of them loved it. And it was really fun because we're working with something that was so exciting to us, robots, in a classroom at school. You know, most kids at my school think school is pretty boring, but this brought like fun into it. So not only were we able to mix it with current stuff that we know, but we are also able to engage it in an active, fun, and interesting setting. So just setting it up, like I said, was pretty fun, looking at the map, and even creating a team. We got to be really creative. With the robots, we are able to make like our own, and so far we're looking forward to programming them and making them do all these cool tasks on the course. The map was really fun and interesting to look at. Just how they set up the program was quite interesting. And for me as a student, this was really great because it offered an opportunity to show like how to be good at something that some kids might want to do in the future, robotics, obviously, and Legos. I mean, really, can you blame me? So this program overall has been a joy, and I'm looking forward to doing more with it, learning more about it, and hopefully going to some competitions soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just wanted to give a few thank yous to the people who have been helping us. So Mr. Fredericks at BMS, the shop teacher, built us a competition table, which would allow us to host our own competition, which is nice. And so we're hoping to host an informal competition at some point this year. And then we've also had the support of Principal Scott and the whole ID department and Alberto Barcenas to the tech integration teacher. So we're grateful to be working on this, and we're excited to make progress. Thank you.
I highly recommend finding the dates, and maybe you can find the date on the competition and going to that. It's NASA sponsors it, and they actually get a scholarship for the first couple of years, and they bring a parts trailer and all kinds of stuff, and it's just unreal. I mean, I grew up watching BattleBots, or it started when I was, yeah. Well, anyways, I watch BattleBots all the time, and this is BattleBots, but with tasks. You're not killing each other, but a lot of fun, a lot of excitement of everybody who was there, and I've seen a couple other competitions on YouTube and everything. So maybe we could get that date and find out when it, and be able to go up there and just the excitement of watching it was just unreal.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, at this time, I'd like to move our new president. It's our organizational end of the year time, and Diane is. Do you like to make sure that you want to be president for next year? Since the policy is the clerk will now move in as president, so I will move out my seat and let you take over, or I'll wait till we get through everything. But I'll let you take over as president, and then we'll move once we figure out who's going to be in your spot.
Thank you. I'm not taking it yet, right?
I'll finish through all this if you want. Okay.
Yes.
So the next one is appointment of the clerk, and I'd like to nominate Stacy as clerk.
Maybe a lot of voting
for me again. Do we make a motion yet?
Yes.
I'll make a motion that Trustee Owen is our next clerk.
I'll second that. All in favor, say aye.
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 I'm like, did you pause?
I'm on it. Okay.
Keep going. I accept. Thank you.
We're moving to approval of the calendar of school board meetings for 2018, and that was sent out earlier. Has everybody had a chance to look at that? Okay. I'll make a motion that we approve the calendar for board meetings for 2018.
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Although I won't be here for February.
For the next year, we will do it meets only twice a year. And I know when I really asked last year's because I was the representative to CSBA, and I was hoping for a connection or a marrying of the two trains of thought, and they don't work together. because we've got the community college. We're working with the community college and the school districts within the community, but CSBA is like one reporting component of it, so it's not an arm of CSBA as I was anticipating. It meets just before the spring meeting that we have and just before the fall meeting that we have. So it should be meeting around March, I believe. I think is the next meeting date, and we met in September. Mondays, always Mondays, and at 5:30. Mm-hmm. Twice a year. Right.
We will start.
Okay.
I would like to be on that.
And I'm willing to stay with it unless someone else would like to replace it.
Next one is Benicia Youth Action Coalition, and I will gladly stay on that since I'm the chairman of that group. Unless somebody else would like to also attend. Right, yeah.
No, we've met.
Oh, did you meet?
3 times last time.
Oh, great. Oh, okay. Are they evening meetings? Oh, okay.
Yeah. Usually 6:30 with a small little dinner and a salad or.
I can go back. Mhm. Right. Okay.
I'll say,
Do we all?
you can.
It'll be like best 2 out of 3.
What I'll do is I'll just send out. Okay. And then so we can have one. Mm-hmm.
How often?
No, I thoroughly enjoy it and I'm fine with it. And I get that I'm freer during the day. I don't have a problem, but I just want to share the will.
You can put me on that. It's just I just can't guarantee you right now.
Yes. I'll stay on that. And then next is the wellness. I have 2.
Usually afternoons. You know, I can stay on that too.
can stay on that.
Can I make a motion, just a sweeping motion? Okay, so I move to approve all of the board appointments for our committees.
I'll second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so that passes.
Wait, before you do that, Mr. Wing, I would just like to thank you for your service as the president. It's I came in and started with you as a president, and just a terrific leader in that role. Thoughtful, involved, collaborative, and everybody would say about you, and I would agree, just a real servant's heart. So thank you. You're a great president.
Thank you.
You're a hard worker, and you obviously have your heart here in the district. You care very much. It's clear that you care very, very much about the kids in our district, and you put a lot of time and energy and show up to meetings and drive off to work and get off work and come to meetings. So
Fix the sound systems and got graduation going and everything. It's pretty amazing. You are like our all around take care of whatever we need. It's pretty impressive. So, and I expect that you're going to continue that.
Yes.
Even more.
Yes.
I appreciate that.
Don't stop.
It was I was the clerk and I was hesitant, and Rosie said, "No, you will be the president, and you need to step up and take that." And then my first role as president was Janice Adams going, "Oh, I'm retiring and need to find a new superintendent." But I thank you all for the kind words, and yes, that I just doing what I expect to be done. So thank you. So this time I will trade spots.
So, mic on too. Okay, fine. We're going to hear from our reports now, first from our students and then our superintendent. So, gentlemen.
Hello, everybody. My name is
Hi.
Alex Torres, and I'm going to talk about a concern at BHS and in our past events. So one concern at our school is the HVAC system. So some classrooms don't have the privilege to really change their temperature, while some do. The ones that don't, the heater, it gets really, really hot in the room, really hot. And just thought we should bring that up because I believe that's a district thing that could be changed. So maybe perhaps during the day where it's most warm, like around, 11, 12 after lunchtime, the temperature could go down just a little bit. We do like the heat, especially on cold days, but just not too hot. Now for some past events. So this week is Wellness Week at BHS. So past, but also current and future. So it'll be ending on Tuesday, and Wellness Week. We have Wellness Week to help our students kind of not de-stress from studying for finals. It's not meant to be looked at as a spirit week, just for fun. This past weekend, our drama department finished their fall play. I was unable to attend both the weekends, but from people who were able to attend, they said that they enjoyed the play. And then we had a monthly student forum this past Wednesday to discuss concerns at BHS.
And I'm Christian Chavez, and I will be talking about our upcoming events here at Benicia High School. So currently, we're taking signups for our annual talent show that will be held in January. So hoping to get a good turnout for that. And then next week starts finals week from Wednesday through Friday. Stress is among us. And then after that, we have winter break. So we're all excited for that.
Could I just for a minute address?
Sure.
So the HVAC system, the maintenance has been working all year on that, and we know it's an issue. And besides funds, you know, there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done on that. But they are working on that, and they put in for some grant money and stuff as well. So it's not something that, you know, it's just, you know, but let you know that they are working on that, and they're aware of the gym and some of the classrooms. So.
Well done. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
We can find that out for you. Thank you very much. Yeah, just a few thoughts. So thanks, Vic. Well done. Just a couple of thoughts. You know, as we head into the holidays, and I was doing some reflecting as I often do, and I wanted to just take a moment to thank everyone who works in the district, and to thank you guys and the parents and the people who volunteer for us. And we do a lot of really outstanding work in this school district. We do. And the list is long, and I won't go through everything, but I just want to take a minute to focus on some of the things that popped into my head that just speak to me about how amazing this school district is. So our amazingness, it ranges from the literacy focus at the elementary school with the adoption of the workshop model, and doing that with a great degree of fidelity, and in doing that, supporting teachers in that model. And then that literacy movement moving into the middle school and supporting that effort there. We have a lot of exciting work taking place with the adoption of the next generation science standards. That's a big shift for us, and we adopted those last year, and we'll continue to do excellent work around that. We have an excellent focus taking place at the middle school in many areas, and in particular, you know, continuing to look in a research-based way on the characteristics of the middle school student, and what can we do to continue to refine that program to meet their needs. We have many new course offerings at the high school. We continue to have positive gains on our SBAC scores, and Dr. Beetson will talk about that. We have many support systems in place for some of our students in need. We are doing a lot of exciting work with technology throughout the district. We have strong leadership at the school sites. We have strong leadership at the district office. We have I'm just reminding us of all these things. We have a strong governance team. I think there's a very excellent school board. I think you're thoughtful, caring, engaged people, and I think we're doing good work together. We have truly outstanding, thoughtful, and caring teachers and classified staff, and we have research to back that statement up. We really do. Our employees are proud to work in BUSD. We have evidence to back that up, and they like coming to work, like being here, which is important. We have strong community involvement, and we're making strong gains with our Measure S dollars. I think using them in a way that's making a positive difference for our students and following our facilities master plan. And I'm proud of our staff for, applying for additional matching funds to help us extend our Measure S dollars. I'm excited about our energy program, which is functioning on two levels: the energy efficiency piece, which is through Prop 39, and then the energy generation piece, which is through that solar project that we've initiated. And I don't know if you've driven around and looked at those panels. It's pretty exciting to see them coming in, and I think they'll be online sooner than we think, hopefully, early spring. So the list of our accomplishments goes on and on. I'm very proud of all of us. And I just wanted to remind ourselves of this periodically and take a moment to recognize the good work that we do every day on behalf of kids. This really is a very special school district. And thank you. Thank you to everybody. Thank you to the community. Thank you to all staff. It's an honor to be your superintendent. And I think we're headed into the holiday season very, very strong and well positioned. We always get stronger by being analytical of the things that we do, and we will continue to do that and work through the challenges that we have. But this is a great place for kids, and into the new year strong. Thank you.
I got back a few hours ago from Westminster Woods, and we were there since Monday, and we had it was cold, but it was dry. We were very lucky. It was beautiful there. I just to echo what you said, Dr. Young. We get there and we bring about 90 kids, I think, and the difference between our schools and other schools who show up is we show up with 90 kids and 22 parents, and there are two other schools that were there, and they each had maybe 7 or 8 parents with a comparable number of students. And the naturalists and the instructors were there, kept telling stories over and over again about Benicia. And they knew the teachers, they knew, one of them kept saying how, I love your librarian, Ms. Bambi. and he just went back years. And they said to the kids, and they said privately, that there's just something special about Benicia kids. And and it's not that they're smarter or more athletic, but they have a character to them. They're polite, they're respectful, they don't have the disciplinary problems that they have with other children. And that's all attributable to the teachers on site and the leadership that they offer. And so watching all that was just great. And this year, as last year, the PTA was able to add a 4th day to the program. So the kids got to do a challenge course, a ropes course. And that was really great. And we had a special needs student who showed up, and everyone cheered him on. And he did the zip line, and it was really cool. And so neat week. A lot of dirty and smelly kids came back to their parents, and as well as adults. And so that was fun. And I also wanted to add, we left last weekend. I wanted to thank Dr. Young, reflecting on the end of the year. Earlier in the year, Dr. Young had made a couple phone calls and said, in his role as superintendent, I just don't feel right what's going on in this community with this cannabis debate. And I really think we should be thinking about what it means for the students, and led a real effort to, I think, begin that thinking, which culminated just before we all left the week before in a city council debate in which the city council voted not to permit cannabis sales on First Street. I want to thank the city council, all of them, Mayor Patterson, Vice Mayor Young. Vice Mayor Young attended one of our workshops. It was clear they had listened, but I don't know they would have listened had they not for your leadership, Dr. Young. So thank you, and I think that's really important. The debate continues next Tuesday. The Police Officers Association has come out strongly opposed to the proposals, and I hope people will participate in the debate. It's very important. And then lastly, I just want to add, you've been following the press, and we have had tremendous success in the district this year. We face tremendous challenges next year, and I worry very much about the financial picture for the district. And I read the papers. The district neighboring us, the districts across the state, they are all facing similar challenges. And I'm hopeful that we can step up to that challenge and take courageous choices and leadership in dealing with that head on before the circumstances control us. I heard someone say once, you can either live in the vision or you can live in the circumstance. Right now, it feels to me we're living in the circumstance. We don't have a plan of attack. We don't have a plan of action. We will be challenged with this next year. We may not be as worse off as others, but I'm not sure that we're doing anything to prevent that yet.
And so, like I say, there's lots to be proud of for this year, and there's lots to be worried about for next year, and that's just top of mind. Well, thank you.
I totally forgot about this, and as Superintendent Young brought it up, the solar panels. So because of the new project at our school, that has decreased the amount of parking for our students. What we're told, I usually get there early, so it doesn't really concern me, but for those who don't get there early, they have to park in residential areas. And that is what our administration tells us to do. Lately, they've been getting tickets and notes from the residents. Don't park here, we need places to park. So I was just wondering, maybe next time when we have a project at the school in the future, if you guys can maybe come up with a plan to work with residential if it affects the students' parking. Just wanted to bring that up. Thank you.
I was just going to check in about the outdoor ed. I went on my daughter's last year, and I just was inspired by what you said to say that I think same exact experience. There was another school there in our school, and our school, Mary Farmer, was so well behaved. You were there. I thought, and we had so many parents, and we got really similar feedback that they remember us and that our kids do really well. So I wanted to mention that. I also was really proud. It was fun to be at the tree lighting this recently, and hearing our bands for the middle and high school playing really added to the festivities. And they look like, my daughter was playing with middle school band, but the kids look, I mean, they look like they're having so much fun. The high school bands too. I mean, they look inspired, and they really add to the event itself. And it made me feel really proud of our band programs.
The last thing I'll add is that several of us attended the California School Board Association's meeting and went through 2 days of a lot of learning and education to help us better govern and grow in our roles, and brought back lots of great information to help our district move forward. And so, we've been since then working at distributing information and working with folks on how we can make some improvements.
I just want to second that. I mean, all but 2 of my classes were really knowledgeable and exciting, and learned some stuff that our own county is doing that we had to go all the way to San Diego to find out. But, well, I'll mention that. But anyways, we was able to take that information and pass it on to the high school and some other people, and just be able to see the LCAP and in use in the new dashboard and all that explained, in which I know you'll talk more about that. But it was fun. It was a lot of good opportunity, and like I said, it's to help us be better board members. And so just like to thank the district for allowing us to go to that.
And I will agree to that. I was going to mention that as well. There was a lot of, I felt, really intense learning that we've been able to discuss and be able to share. And I really appreciated that. I also spent 2 days with the California School Board Association, because I am our district rep. Actually, I'm part of the region rep. It's a delegate there. And they did a lot of legal work for us that day. They went through a lot of regulations that are coming down from the state of California. They talked a lot about the positioning with the LCFF, being that this is Governor Brown's last year, and a lot of anticipations of what that might look like. They talked about the input on schools with regards to some of the charter proposals that are beginning to come forward, and the regulations regarding the fact that there is an equity with regards to public education and the private schools. And they also talked a lot about the impact with the federal government, the actions that the federal government, the tax laws and the budgets that are happening, and what the possible ramifications could be for us. And California is one of the largest recipients of federal dollars, and that's really leaving us in what could be a potential quandary of what we're going to do and how we're going to absorb that. So until all that is resolved, they put a lot of caution out there for us and told us to make sure we stay really mindful of that. So just, just to share that with everyone. It is a reality that's happening to us, and we just need to be cognizant of it so that as it comes forward, we do that. I also went to facility this week. That was also real exciting. We saw some of the potential plans that were, actually the middle school may have already seen them. I know they were getting ready to get out there. Did you have your facility meeting yet? She's not sure. But anyways, they're going out to see a proposed plan. With their representatives. Okay.
On Tuesday.
So they were supposed to get some feedback from teachers, and after they got their staff feedback, then it's going to come to us for feedback as well. But it was pretty exciting. I thought it was better than even I was hoping it would be. So I think we've got some wonderful things to look forward to. We talked about some next steps, so I guess that'll be part of our next board study session, I believe we're going to have, in order so that we could really get in there and muck with it and see it and be able to give some feedback. I did also sit with our district curriculum council the other night, and we've got some amazing people on that committee. I have to say, there are some pretty incredible things going on, but the leadership from those teachers and the conversations that were going on, I kind of sat there and I just kind of felt, you know what, we're in good hands. It's going to be okay. We've done some pretty amazing things. We've seen a lot of success in a lot of areas, and it's not saying we don't have things to do and we don't have work to do yet and we don't have areas to grow on. The last board meeting, Mr. Morgan, you talked about some of the gaps and what we need to be looking for and going forward, and they were hitting it head on, and I was just really proud of the team. I thought it was great work, and want to thank Dr. Beatson and Ms. Rice for leading that, because I thought it was really awesome. So, and then the last thing I had was I wanted to thank also Dr. Young for leading us with the cannabis, but especially with the teachers that came, the parents that came, the students that came to that meeting that night. It was overwhelming. The rooms were packed. In fact, they filled 3 rooms. I didn't even know there were those other 2 holding rooms that existed in City Hall, and our kids and our teachers and parents were filling them. They were articulate. They were clear about what they wanted, and they were really focused on the health and safety of our children and our community and what we need to be sure that we're mindful of and we're taking care of. So I know we had an email going around thanking everybody, but I just need to put out there, we had principals there, we had staff from everywhere, and I was so proud to be part of this district as I sat there and watched. Some of us couldn't talk. I was one of the ones that talked at the last meeting, so I had to keep my mouth shut this time. That was really hard. But they will hear my voice next time. But it was just, it was just wonderful to see, and I'm just hoping we can rally the troops and get them out there again on Tuesday night, I believe, right? As we take on part 2, and we have those discussions as well. And I hope that they're as rich and as meaningful as they were the last time. So, thank you, Benicia. We were pretty impressive. I think we did well. And that's all I got. Okay. If our students would like to leave, this is a good time for you to bail, so you can go study for your finals.
Good luck.
And have a great holiday. We'll see you in January. Okay. So now it's time for comments from the public. Let's say for members of the public that may address the board on any item within the board's jurisdiction, cards may be completed requesting to address the board are available at the back table and may be submitted to the board secretary at the meeting. The governing board allows speakers to speak on agendized and not agendized matters under public comment. Comments are limited to no more than 3 minutes per speaker. By law, no action may be taken on any item raised during public comment periods, and matters may be referred to staff for placement on a future agenda of the governing board. Our first speaker is Boo Franchini. Is that correct? Billy? Oh, I'm so sorry. Bill? I'm sorry.
Can they call you Boo?
Well, it was all.
I'm sure glad I'm not the only name butcher. I just want you to know that.
It's Bill Franchini, but that's fine. I get called a lot of different names, so that's fine.
Superintendent, board members, and staff, I'd like to speak about an agendized item tonight, which is your first interim report. I'm very familiar with the budget process. Just as a preface to my background, I was a teacher for 15 years in Southern California. I worked for 20 years for the California Teachers Association, handling personnel matters and bargaining, and then went to work as an assistant superintendent for HR and the labor negotiator for the Palos Verdes Peninsula Unified School District in Southern California. So I'm very familiar with the process. Looking through the interim report, it's based upon a number of assumptions. I see you have a structural deficit with a slightly declining enrollment. And of course, you're facing what many districts are across the state in terms of being underfunded. I've been in public education for 43 years. It's been 43 years we've been fighting that battle about getting a proper funding from the state of California, and also from the federal government in terms of state mandates or federal government mandates that are underfunded. So I understand that. Moved to Benicia in retirement because of the schools. I always have wanted to live in a district or in a town that has a good school district. It's very important. And I think homeowners and land values reflect that. Our district faced similar problems as you do, the triple whammy of insufficient state funding, which I've mentioned, declining enrollment, unsettled negotiations with the prospect of teachers leaving for higher paid districts. That was what we were always contending with as well. We were surrounded by many districts who had funding much at higher levels than we did. And when all these problems converge, you have to sometimes find some creative solutions. One that we used, which my purpose in sharing it with you tonight is to maybe begin a discussion about that, or in the future, is to work with expert agencies to define and design supplemental retirement plans. There are two that are major players in the state of California. One is the Keenan Associates, who have a SERP plan, and also the PARS organization, which works with agencies to design supplemental retirement plans. The idea of these plans is, of course, to offer something to particularly your certificated staff to retire prior to when they might have thought that they would retire. And how do you do that in a way when someone has in their mind they're going to retire at a certain age with a certain number of years experience with CalSTRS? How do you do that? Well, the way you do that is to offer them an incentive of an annuity that will close that gap between what their retirement will offer them now or what it might be in the future. Is that my 3 minutes or warning? Okay, I'll finish up. And I think the district is ripe for that. You may have had one in the past, but very briefly, these firms will come in with a census of your staff, of how many years they have and what their ages are, and design a plan for you that might induce people to retirement earlier. And then, of course, if you're in declining enrollment, you may not replace certain individuals, and then you have the savings of that entire salary. Or you may replace them, but with younger teachers who come in lower on the salary schedule, and thereby you have some savings there too. So I would encourage you to, if you haven't already, and I haven't talked to the superintendent to know whether you've even had discussions about this or that he's familiar with them. But I hope that you'll at least consider that. And I have by the way, for transparency's sake, I do not work for these organizations. I'm not a consultant. I did talk to some of the people that I used to work with to see if these plans are still available and working, and they are. So I have a handout for each of the board members and the superintendent about both the Keenan Financial Services and the PARS organization just for your pleasure and reading. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments from the public? Okay. Seeing none, public comment is closed, and we move to the consent calendar. All matters listed on the consent calendar are considered by the board to be routine and will be approved by the board in one motion. There will be no discussion on these items unless members of the board, staff, or public request specific items to be pulled and discussed. Do I have any?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar as listed.
Do I have a second?
And it's a roll call because it's a resolution.
Right.
President Ferrucci,
Yes.
Trustee Holguin,
Yes.
Trustee Monette,
Yes.
Trustee Morgan, Trustee Wing.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that's passed. Now I believe we're moving to the non-consent action item. Is that correct? Okay. Dr. Young, would you like to see this up?
Good evening. We have, there's two items on your agenda tonight related to the audits of our school district. The first one, 14.1, is for the general audit, financial audit of the district, and 14.2 is for the audit of our facility bond program. So tonight we have Jesse Diol from James Marta CPA firm who performed both of those audits. They have been reviewed, and the opinion says that the statements of the district present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the government activities for the fund and for the bond fund as well, and for the respective changes in financial position for the year ended June 30th, 2017. And Mr. Dale has a few slides he'd like to share to highlight some of those audit highlights for you.
Thank you, Tim. Good evening, everyone. I'm Jesse from the independent auditor firm, James Martin Company. Just wanted to give you a brief overview. The process of the audit is a process of accountability for the district and everybody of the public. The most important thing you want to take away from this, we had an unmodified opinion, which means it's a clean audit for the district financials. If you don't want to read the entire audit report, you can refer back to the MD&A, which is pages 4 through 9. That gives you a brief overview, the financial highlights. And so that's the best resource for you guys to use if you wanted to see how the district fared in fiscal year 16-17. And I pulled some of those figures out for you. You wanted to look at the change at the bottom. You can see that we had a 3% decrease in net position in the fiscal year. Next. And then the one key aspect that I wanted to point out was the components of net position. You can see the net invested in capital assets. It is a negative figure, but that's because a lot of the proceeds are from the general obligation bonds, and then you also have capital leases and so forth. So it is a negative figure because there's a lot of unspent funds currently. The unrestricted portion, that's also negative because of that net pension liability, and that is going to continue to go up. And then looking forward, there's going to be implementation of the GASB 75, which is the OPEB liability. That's going to be fully recognized in fiscal year 17-18. So I just wanted to bring that out for you guys to be aware of that. As far as the statement of net activities, you can see that we had a decrease in net position by $1.1 million. You can just click through all of these. And so this is basically what I just discussed. And as far as the decreases, you can see that the fund expenditures, they increased by about 14%. And then a lot of that was made up of the salary increases and benefits. And so that is also another item that's been increasing over the last couple of years. The PERS and STIRS contributions, they have been increasing. They're going to continue to increase. So just wanted to bring that up to your attention so you guys are mindful when you're doing the budgeting process going forward. And then this is just an overview of how the general fund revenues are made up. You can see that 83% is made up from LCFF funding. And so there was about a 5% increase in the LCFF funding, and you're going to start to see that taper off a little bit. It's because a lot of the LEAs in California have been fully implemented. So you're not going to get to see those huge increases that you did in the last couple of years. And also with the revenues, the one-time mandated reimbursements, they're also going to start to taper off. In 16-17 fiscal year, you had 1.2 million, and it's budgeted for 685,000 for fiscal year 17-18. As far as the general fund expenditures, you can see salaries and benefits make up about 86%. So just be mindful when you guys are negotiating for salary increases, because a lot of the expenditures are tied up in salaries and benefits. And as I just mentioned, the PERS and STIRS, the contributions are going up. So just be mindful of that going into the future as well. And if you take a step back and look at what's happened in the state of California, I mentioned already that the LCF funding model has been fully implemented in about 97% of the LEAs in California. This next fiscal year, it's going to be going to 100%. And again, I wanted to mention that one-time discretionary funds are going to start to taper off, although the state of California has issued an increase for 17-18. And if we're still focusing on California, you can see the general fund had an increase of $92.7 million. And a lot of that is funding coming for the child development programs and ACEs and so forth. And then focusing back on your district, I wanted to pull this slide out. It's called the Financial Trends and Analysis. You can see how you can see the change in fund balance, how it increased last year, but then in fiscal year 16-17, it decreased. You guys are budgeted to have a decrease. So that's the other thing I wanted to point out. And the other thing is, you can see that long-term debt has been increasing, and that has to do with a couple things. You guys have issued some general obligation bonds, and you guys have increased with the net pension liability. And so it is going to keep going up. And then, as I mentioned, the OPEB liability is going to be recognized, so that's going to also impact that figure.
Explain what that is.
Which one, the OPEB? So that's your other post-employment benefits. So right now, you guys are doing a pay-as-you-go, but when we are implementing the GASB 75 implementation, you guys are going to have to basically, there's a trust that you have been putting money into, and then there's the actual liability. And then when you net it together, if it's a negative number, then that's going to impact your long-term debt. Now, if you have overfunded, then it's going to be an asset. So it's highly unlikely that you have an asset, just because the service costs have been increasing year over year. So until we see the actuary, I can't give you a definite figure, but that's something that we've already discussed with your management team, and they've already been making the phone calls with the actuary to get that started. So fiscal year 17-18, when it comes to an end, we'll be able to help you implement that, and then you'll actually see how it affected the district. But I just want you guys to be aware that potentially that your liabilities are going to increase. So, and then along with the audit opinion, we have other communications that are required to communicate. So we issued an opinion on the state compliance. We also issued a letter on the internal control of the districts. And then we did an opinion on the federal single audit. And then we issued a letter to you, the governing body, of how the district fared and if there was any issues with the course of the audit. I'm going to get into that. As far as the state compliance, there were no findings. So you guys did a great job with complying with the state laws. As far as the internal control, there were no findings, no issues with segregation of duties. You have strong controls in place. So kudos to the business department. You guys have proper oversight, so that's really good. And as far as the federal compliance, when we did the federal compliance audit, we didn't have any issues with expenditures being inappropriate. And so we also tested internal controls over the federal compliance, and we didn't have any issues with that. So you have an unmodified opinion on this federal compliance as well. As far as the status of prior year findings, we had ASB deficiencies in the previous year. They were fully implemented, so that's another kudos to all the sites. They've fully implemented all the recommendations that we've had in the last few years.
And that's always a good one because that one was hanging there for
for
several
quite some time.
times of getting all the student funds corrected and not have it as a finding.
Yes. Yes.
So kudos to all of our personnel who handles our student funds and everything. So
Yeah, and Kathy's been doing a good job. She's been going out doing surprise audits, so she's on top of it. So good job to her too. And as far as the compensated absence carryover, that used to be an issue in previous years. However, we didn't have anyone that was over the policy. So that's another good job to Tim and his staff. They've had proper oversight, and so that's been fully implemented as well. So as far as the letter that we've issued to you, we didn't have any issues. That's about it. Any questions or anything? All right, well, I'll get into the Measure S. So I'm going to actually speed through this. We can go through this. This is the third year of the bond audit, and we did the performance and financial audit, and as far as and also the internal control audit for the Measure S proceeds. So you can see that there was Series A that was issued a few years back for $20 million, and then last year we had the $29.6 million. That was the rest of the Measure S. And as far as you can go to the next slide as well. So this is actually the income statement for the bond. You can see that there's $33 million left over during the year, and about $10.2 million on the capital projects. So you still have about a little bit over $30 million that's left for projects that are upcoming. Next slide. And it's about $33 million as of June 2017. So I'm sure you guys have been spending more since then. So as far as the performance piece of it, we are required to report to you on how the compliance piece is, if every expenditure is in accordance with the bond text. So we didn't have any issues with that. The district is separately tracking all the bond proceeds and all the expenditures. We also compared it to the contracts and any change orders. We didn't know any issues on that. There's proper oversight. As I mentioned before, the district has great controls in place, segregation of duties. Next slide. And so when we tested all the expenditures, again, we didn't have any issues of non-compliance. So there's nothing to report. And again, we just wanted to thank you guys for having us serve the district's needs. And any questions? All right, that's it. Thank you.
Make them pay.
first,
Do
is
we
there any
need
public comment or questions before you take off?
Okay, seeing none. Okay, I can call for a motion to accept and approve the audit for Benicia Unified Public Schools for 2016. The 16-17 school year. Or do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Okay. Roll call. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I need a motion to accept the Measure S.
I'll motion to accept the Measure S audit as provided. I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? back up the discussion item now? Okay, so that's back to Tim. Mr. Rejo.
Yes, good evening. So this is the last action item you have tonight. It's 14.3, and it is the 2017-18 first interim financial report for our school district. We're asking you to take a look at it, review it here, and approve it so we can pass that along to the Solano County Office of Education and the California Department of Education. So we have the official report in the board packet, and these following pie charts and graphs attempt to summarize the information that's in our first interim report. The first one shows and graphs our revenues, the revenues that are budgeted by our district for 17-18. This is for our general fund. It's at $50.5 million. And in the pie chart, you can see what we did here is, we mentioned this at the last time. So currently in our budget, we do have $5.5 million in our general fund for the solar proceeds that we have a state 0% loan and an energy bond low interest loan. So right now we didn't have a vehicle to house that anywhere, so it's in the general fund. But we did recently approve Fund 40 for facility type projects, and so we just got that approved by the Solano County Auditor Controller, and so it exists. And now we will be moving those funds in that budget over to Fund 40. So, but right now in the first interim, it does exist there. These percentages that you see are percentages without that $5.5 million for the facility solar project. So we wanted to put the percentages in there that are more accurate, that depict what the general fund operations are. And so on that note, we in the pie chart, we get most of our money from the state of California for the new local control funding formula, LCFF. We get about 86% of our funds from the state. That's about $38.7 million. And then the state provides some other funding sources, including a one-time grant amount, and that is just under $700,000. And so that is part of 6% at the $2.9 million. The federal government is mainly made up of special ed funds and some other smaller programs at $1,057,000. And then the local and other funds are donations. We also get a majority of our special ed funds through our local group, and that amounts to about $2.4 million. So up at the top, it is summarized at $50.5 million. That includes the $5.5 million. Once we move that in the second interim report, the solar funds will be out of here. So we have we're right at $45 million in revenues, plus the $5.5 million for solar would be the 50.5. Down in if we just scroll down a little bit on that slide, we're always reminded about how we receive or how the state pays us with our state LCFF funds. About 2/3 of it comes out of the state budget itself, and then the other third, or 37%, comes from the property taxes that are generated by the properties that are in our district, about $14.2 million. On the next sheet, we do a pie chart of our expenditures. And so we are at $52.3 million in expenditures. Again, that does include the $5.5 million for the solar project. So without that, we're at about $46.8 million. And the pie chart is a graphic without the solar project in there. We have our salaries and benefits for our certificated and classified employees. And if we add those up, that's about 85% of our budget. The remaining 15% is for supplies, services, and capital outlay. So at that amount, we're about $46.8 million, plus the $5.5 million for the solar is $52.3. If we compare the two numbers, the revenues and expenditures, we are operating at about a $1.8 million deficit, and about $800,000 of that is for one-time items, and about $1 million is for an ongoing operating deficit. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a later slide. So what's left, what's estimated or budgeted to be left at the end of 2017-18, we have $5.4 million, which is made up of basically three things. The state's recommended 3% reserve for designated economic uncertainties. It's about $1.6 million. The board policy reserve at $1.8 million. That's in accordance with the board policy. And then the remainder of that, $1.9 million, is for other restricted programs. Just wanted to point out real quick, because in order to file the first interim report, the reason why the 3% is a little bit higher and the board policy is a little bit lower is because we do have that $5.5 million of the solar project in Fund 1 right now, and so that mandates us to keep the 3% up there above the 3% level. And so the next time you see it in total, they'll be about the same. But we did have to bump that up and take the board policy down a little bit to meet the 3% state requirement. The next slide is a relatively new slide. Over the last couple of years, we've been faced with increases to our employee retirement pensions. The group at the top are the STRS retirement system for our teachers and other certificated staff. And for many, many years, 13, 14, and prior, our employer contribution rate was 8.25%. But every year since then, because of the financial struggles that retirement system is having, it's asked employers like Benicia Unified to contribute 1.85% more. And so each year, in addition to what we've been paying into the system, we're also paying in $400,000 or more each year that we didn't have to come up with before. And you can kind of see that in the second to the right column under the additional column there. Down in the bottom part of this slide in number 2, we also have a PERS retirement system for our other classified employees, not our teachers and certificated, but for our classified folks. And you can also see rate increases since 13-14. And just due to the size of our payroll there, it's the dollar amount isn't as high as the STRS up above, but paying anywhere between over $100,000 to closer to $200,000 over the following years. So that's a real expense that we need to put in our budget, and these are on track to happen until we get other information that indicates otherwise. We will need to budget and pay for these employee pension costs.
So, Tim, at CSBA, our workshop on CalPERS and CalSTRS was pretty bleak, to say it mildly. Scary, yeah. And I'm trying to figure out how to ask this question. And so if we're looking at additional $400,000, $600,000 between the two programs, we're looking at adding these to our ongoing structural debt.
Yes.
Right? So, I mean, we can anticipate that our structural debt goes up by $600,000.
Yes.
And so in the workshop, when they were talking about there's the potential that these percentages would also increase over time. Am I reading it correctly to look at the fact that we're going to have to be cutting this amount of money in order to meet these costs?
The additional costs that we're facing for both of those retirement systems is one of several factors that contributes to why we're operating at a deficit right now. The very next page kind of lists some of those other things that we need to be aware of that contribute to how our money is spent. But yes, the additional STRS and PERS costs contribute to our operating deficit.
And the only way we're making those up is we cut money at other places, because LCFF is not. We're not going to get raises or increases revenue to equal these costs.
The additional revenues in 18-19. So if we look 1 year out, based on the information that we have today, mentioned earlier, we're operating at about a $1.8 million operating deficit right now. But $800,000 of that is for carryovers, which are one-time in nature, and the other $1 million is an ongoing operating deficit. That's for 17-18. And then when we look at what's projected to happen in 18-19, based on the new LCFF funds that we get and these additional costs, there's another $1 million operating deficit right now, based on the information we have from the state for 18-19. And so the $2 million operating deficit, or the issue at hand, is basically $1 million from this year and $1 million projected for what would come to us in 18-19.
And then 1920 is 2.6 million.
1920. So let's go ahead and flip the page. So we do have.
Before we go on to that, one more comment that came up in those conversations about the budget is we were informed that they are looking at, and I forgot what the 7% is, instead of dropping it to 6%.
The interest rate they're expecting to earn on
Right.
CalPERS and STRS stock portfolios
They're on their
is now set at 7%.
They were saying,
which is
I'm
unrealistic.
trying to remember. Do you remember what the ratio was? It was like every 0.25% is equal to X number of dollars.
Yeah.
was a lot.
So right
It was
now,
a
yeah,
lot. It was a lot.
the employee pension agencies at the state, they're projecting their current investment returns to earn 7%. And if the current information is indicating that they're not going to earn that, then that means they got to collect the money from employers or employees to make sure that they have money on hand to pay their pensions when they come due. I'll mention too the STRS retirement system for the certificated employees, not the PERS. Only the STRS also collects contributions from the state of California directly. Mm-hmm. So that retirement system collects from 3 different sources. The state of California itself has a line item for that. Employers with certificated employees, and then the employees themselves. The PERS system, it just collects from the employers and the employees. The state does not kick in a contribution to PERS.
Just a quick question. So are these estimates in terms of the increase rates over the years? What they're set? So it could be worse or it could be better.
Correct.
Essentially, because we don't really know how those funds are going to perform, right?
I believe the STRS ones are a little bit more locked in. It would take more legwork from in order to change those rates. It doesn't mean that they couldn't be. The PERS rates, I believe they could change a little bit more readily, more on an annual basis. We are going to the state budget workshop. The governor every year does a budget proposal in January, so we'll be going to Sacramento in mid-January to hear what the governor's budget proposal is for 18-19. We're not anticipating any changes to the current year, 17-18, so that information should be pretty much locked in. But for 18-19, we'll see if there's any information on retirement rates that get charged and the other key fiscal factors.
So those with PERS are determined every year.
Pardon?
Those with PERS, like the increases or decreases in terms of our contributions, are determined annually?
I believe they are determined annually, yes. Mm-hmm. But they not only determine the annual year, they also publish the outer years as well.
They're prediction, essentially.
Okay, and then so this next page attempts to identify some of our key fiscal factors which are essential in operating our district. And we start with known salary-related costs in our school district, like the others in California. We have salary schedules, and so as employees stay within our district, they can move up in the salary schedule, which is an added salary cost. And so that is over $400,000 a year. Then on top of that are the additional STRS and PERS costs that we just talked about in the outer years, over $600,000. And it just to note, in 17-18, last year we settled with our certificated bargaining unit for a raise, which was partially implemented in last year, and then the full impact was needed to be covered and paid for in 17-18. So that was just under $500,000. Second, our other big revenue and expenditure items. Right now, we're really just identifying our special education programs, increasing by a couple $100,000 this year. It's kind of an ongoing program that we analyze next year. We're right now projecting that it won't go up by as much, by about $45,000. The
Jim, why it's going up?
there is a variety. The student population changes, their needs change, and then the services that we need to provide with them. There have been some other agency costs outside of the school district that we're required to tap into, which come with a higher price tag.
Are we getting less revenue, or just if the programs are costing more?
Yes, I'm trying to think. So this is a net negative. We are getting a little bit less from the federal government. So we are getting a little bit less there. And I'm trying to remember if our state funds that go through our local agency, they're about the same or a little bit less. I would say the majority reduction is coming from the federal government.
Didn't SELPA also go up in their fees? Didn't our portion of SELPA also increase?
So Benicia is part of the SELPA, the Solano County Special Ed group. And so what happens so our revenues don't come directly to us. They go through the SELPA, through the Solano County local group. And what they do is they don't just divvy it up to the 6 district members, and they take some things off the top to pay for regional services. And so I'm pausing a little bit to remember if some of those regional services which went up, which would have given us a lower net amount. So we can come back with a little bit more information on special ed funding next time. Number 3 in the middle is kind of, that's an added whammy to our school district with who we've enjoyed pretty stable enrollment over the last, before the last couple years, but for the last 6 years prior to that, our enrollment was pretty flat. It was pretty stable, which basically meant the same number of kids showed up in our schools from year to year until a couple years ago when we kind of dropped a little bit less than 100, and then we dropped 100 again. So when you have less kids enrolled, that's less attendance, and then that's less money from the state. So it's a big deal for us, and we're monitoring that monthly. We're communicating that out to our principals and asking them to be aware of why their kids are leaving. A lot of it is just moving out of the area, but there's some other reasons too. We did a demographic report by an independent consultant who basically said Benicia should in the future be pretty flat. It might decrease by less than 50. It's I think it's actually supposed to be pretty stable or a little bit of an increase for next year, but that's not what our current numbers are showing us. So it's a living, breathing document, and we're going to use our most current accurate information. So that's a challenge that we have. And then we work with our sites to adjust staff to the extent that you can. If you have less students, if you can reduce staff, that some of those services aren't needed.
Mr. Hale, is that decline net of interdistrict or transfers? Because I know we are also seeing an increase in transfers. Is that still we're down that much, even including transfers?
Yeah, we're still down that much, including transfers.
Really, we didn't have the so one of the things I've heard from parents who've been concerned about the transfers, and there's lots of theories about, but one is that the character, we were talking about at the beginning, the characters of the schools, and that with the increase in transfers, less participation by some of the parents and the differences in the students who are essentially commuting to our district to go to school is noticeable. And again, back to we were talking earlier about the value proposition of Benicia. To me, what we're saying is that we're masking the true decline in the population at Benicia, in the Benicia district, by not including the transfers in that number, because if you do, the number is actually twice that size. Right? And so, I mean, we could, if we wanted to, go out and advertise and say all comers come and transfer and increase our revenue, but you are changing culture and the community of the school district. And so again, we are really down. It's not just the 100; it's closer to 200, right? If you include the interdistrict transfers.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we increased by that many interdistricts, but there would be some. So yeah, and our interdistrict attendance, it's floated around 10% over the years. I would say kind of rounded, sometimes a little bit less, sometimes more. And so if you kind of use that as a guideline, that means 1 out of every 10 kids is from outside of our district. So
what's concerning to me is
it's been very consistent.
What's it saying about the district, right? So now we're saying 1 out of 10 students isn't going to be there anymore. And on top of that, 1 is not from the district because they're declining in population. We're not growing families. So in other words, if we were fully staffed, fully enrolled at 10 kids, all from the district 10 years ago, this year we're only at 8.
Right. 10 years ago, we were 1 in 10. That really hasn't changed.
I don't think it's not that. I think we only take interdistrict transfers when we have space, and then we've built schools in the past, right? Now we're shrinking because we were not taking.
I understand that. I mean, I also think there's I think there's yeah. I mean, I wouldn't want to not be open to interdistrict transfers though, based on socioeconomic differences, for example, which I think are probably part of what people are noticing in terms of cultural differences.
No, I actually think it's more
participation
behavior.
Well, I'm concerned that with our.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think we should clarify that before we go any further. Yeah.
So every year I do a review of our transfer students, and they tend to be our higher students as far as grades, attendance, and discipline, because if they aren't, they're out. So at the end of each year, we review them, and those that are not doing well, I send the list to the principals, and they say no, and then I send letters, and we go through ideas. There are a couple times where the county has stepped over us and approved them anyway, but normally it's a very small amount that remain that are not.
And what I'd start to say was that with other districts around us starting to have or continuing to have, but is more of an issue of financial problems, they're not going to be releasing students to come to our district. Right. So we may be seeing a decline on that as well, because they have to be
need their permission.
They have to be approved before they have to be released from that district before they come to our district.
So in the in number 4, what we show on the first line is, again, local control funding formula. That's the money we get from the state based on student attendance. And if we did not have this declining enrollment issue, the first line shows about how much more LCFF money we would get. But because we're declining enrollment and we only get paid for the kids that we have, you can see that we don't get that full funding. We get a reduced amount for the ADA that is no longer there, which is over $700,000 for those 2 years. So that's an added challenge that our district is facing currently. We're hoping that this does stabilize according to our demographic study. We're going to monitor that very closely. And in the outer year, you can see that very far column for 1920, we have made that assumption for 1819 that we will stop declining. Again, we'll know that much more as June approaches and we get a pretty hard count for who's left with us at the end of the year. The next page up at the top shows our operating deficit for 17-18. Again, about $1.8 million. When we roll that over into 18-19, based on those factors we just talked about, it's about a $2 million operating loss. And so right now, we're on track to make budget adjustments of about $2 million. One of the key pieces of information that we will bring back to the school board when we meet next is the information from the governor's January budget proposal. So that's mid-January. At your January 18th board meeting, we should have the information to bring to you about if there has been any changes in that 18-19 column to see if there's maybe something on the positive note. We are getting some information that California revenues are up and that there might be a possibility of, trickling down some of those funds to California schools in 18-19. So we just want to share that with you right now, but for now we need to use the information that we have available.
Mr. Rahal, is there any idea to have a sense of how much that would be?
I do.
Is totally like, but like ballpark? No.
I really don't.
One of the things for two other entities that are all fighting for that same money.
Everybody. Well, and one of the things they talked about at one of our sessions was the fact that these fires are happening.
Mm-hmm.
And the rainy day fund that is going on, and we as voters have and the governor now has in our budget that we are funding the first year of college for the majority of our students. So no pocket of money has yet to be identified. So everybody's kind of speculating where those funds are also going to be coming from. So don't know. It's going to be an interesting conversation.
And the bottom part shows that we do have the 3% and local board policy reserve. So we have the reserve, and that enables us to provide for a positive certification. The remaining slides in this part.
Even though we're deficit, because we have the reserve, we're positive?
Yes. So you can operate at a deficit, but to the extent your deficit eats away into your state's 3% reserve, that's when the trigger hits to qualified or negative. So if you have indicators that indicate you will not be able to maintain the 3% reserve, you would, if you were to continue operating at a deficit, that would eventually eat into the local board policy reserve, which is a local policy. It wouldn't require you to check the qualified or negative button on the interim report, but to the extent the budget adjustments are not made for the 18-19 year, and if those were to eat into the 3% reserve, then that would trigger a different certification.
But just to be clear, the board policy at 1.8 is the same as the projected deficit at 1.8. We've got one more year of life.
Mm-hmm.
Because we'll continue with a equal to or higher than the 1.8 the following year, structurally running a deficit, which means we will then be bankrupt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it will definitely catch up if something doesn't happen on the revenue side, or if we don't make adjustments on the expenditure side, it will catch us.
Can you say what would happen if we had a negative certification?
If we had, so there's 3 certifications: positive, qualified, and negative. So positive means we have a plan, make sure we have the 3% reserve. A qualified means we might not be able to keep the 3% in the current year and outer 2 years. So qualified is kind of like a caution. And when we do that, it alerts the Solano County Office of Education, and they give us a call. They come visit us, and they have a more detailed conversation about, okay, what does this really mean for Benicia, and what are your thoughts on how to get back to positive? The third one, a negative certification, is a red light. It's blinking. The Solano County Office of Education gets much more involved. It's a negative certification, and they are more direct in providing some guidance into how to go about our finances. They don't take over, but a negative certification definitely involves a lot of involvement from the county office, and they can bring in others like the fiscal crisis management team from the state of California if that's something that they deem fit to do.
And at what point do we basically have to get a big loan from the state and we're, the district is...
When we go into state take.
Yeah.
To the extent you've depleted every penny of your reserve, you would see that coming ahead of time. Yeah, but right. I would say through the qualified and negative certifications on your interim reports, because we basically provide quarterly reports. We have the first interim, the second interim. We have we estimate our actuals, our close, and then we have the actual close of the books. So you're getting a quarterly report, and through that system, even if a district was not to check that box, the county will be reviewing the financials themselves. They do their internal review, and if they pick up on something, they could come back and say, we don't agree with your positive certification. It really should be qualified or negative, and we need to get more involved now.
Got it. And so essentially for like the state takeover, we'd have to have no money? Like no reserves?
It would have to be pretty extreme. It would have to, you would be getting down to, there's no cash. There's no cash
Anywhere.
to pay the bills.
Got it.
But that's not far off, right? Because it's 1819, you're saying we blow through our board policy. In 1920, if we continue a 1.8 or more structural deficit, it exceeds the 1.6, which means we are bankrupt.
Without any budget adjustments or more revenue, that we would be heading in that direction. So the emphasis is, if we don't get more revenue, we definitely have serious conversations about budget adjustments.
Or anymore, right? We don't have years to work this out. We are going to have to make a change or get more money in the next 2 years.
Third year.
So we really need to be talking about budget cuts fairly soon.
So internally, with the cabinet level and some reach out to administrators, conversations, this information has been shared about, starting, the thought process about how, if you needed to make adjustments, what could that be?
So on our prior slide, under adjust staffing for declining ADA, it says reduce teachers by 5.
On the previous slide. That was for the 17-18 year,
17-18.
because that trued up our staff for the declining enrollment for that year.
So
at this point in time, when we roll, so here's the other interesting thing. When you roll the projected decline forward, it doesn't always, because the students don't come in nice packages of class size, sometimes you're not able to make the staffing adjustments that you think you might be able to, due to the decline in enrollment, because at all different grade levels at elementary school. So we'll be taking a closer look at that now that we're here in December.
Include any labor.
These projections do not include any costs associated with any type of negotiated salary or negotiated agreement for the 17-18 year or outer year. We're currently in negotiations with our units for for 17-18. And okay, so this one is just a different graph on the fund balance, and the last one is a multi-year line graph of different operating deficits and surpluses over the year. Our goal is to try to maintain break even as much as possible. The last PowerPoint is just some highlights of what some of the things that we've already talked about. I'll just quickly go through those. We've talked about positive certification, which is what we have today. Using the state's funding formula, LCFF, and maintaining that 3% reserve. We're reminded that the LCFF is that new state funding system for California public schools. We're getting about $8,262 per student these days. That includes a 20% bump for students who are enrolled in the free and reduced lunch program, are English learners, or foster youth. And about 22% of our students fall within one of those three categories. We just did our October count, and it appears our new percentage is up a few percentage points. It's actually closer to 25%. So we'll be factoring that into the next calculation. We have our LCAP, so we're required to do a local control accountability plan, and this talks about how we spend our funds. In order to receive the LCFF, we have to have a local control accountability plan, and Ms. Beatson will share some information on that in the next agenda item. And page 14 does put the question out there, what about budget cuts? So we are using the state budget that was approved in June, and at this point are considering budget cuts for the 18-19 and or outer years. We're going to go to the state budget update in January and bring back that information to all of you at the January 18th school board meeting. We'll update our multi-year projections based on that information. What happens then from this, and just a note too that this is Governor Brown's last budget before he is out of office, and so it'll be interesting to see what he presents as part of his last budget. As it happens each year, January basically kicks off the 6-month budget cycle for the state of California. It also kicks off the 6-month budget cycle for our school district. And so what happens is January is our starting point, and then in May, the governor comes back with a May revise based on current information, and we use that to put together our budget for the 18-19 year. But the last bullet on page 14, I'm going to reiterate that contract negotiations with our employee groups have been settled for last year, but they're ongoing for the current year, and as such, we don't have any costs associated with any kind of negotiated salary settlement included in our 17-18 budget or in those outer years. So next steps for us is once approved by the school board, we go ahead and send this to the Solano County Office of Education and the California Department of Ed. And as I've mentioned, the governor will propose his 18-19 budget in January, and we'll bring that back to you in January as we work on the second interim financial report, which will be presented to you in March.
The other thing that was interesting at our conference was hearing all the gubernatorial candidates talk about what their priorities are. And, you know, what was fascinating in that discussion is that their priorities are different from our current in that they are not looking at K-12, they're really looking at early childhood education and where their funding goals are at that level. And so I think that while good in many ways, also presents the challenge that they are not looking at increasing that LCFF basic funding for students, which I think is a challenge for us here in Benicia. Just because the way our model is set up, we're always stuck at that basic level of funding in the LCFF model, and that's not on anybody's agenda as far as I could know.
The thing is that Peter, the good news is there's time, right? If we do something right now, I've been saying this for 4 years, there's been time, but we're irresponsible if we don't do something right now, right? None of this is a surprise to anyone. We have been slipping into deficit spending now for years and looking the other way and being hopeful that things will get better. And maybe they will, but it's never prudent, whether it's your family budget, your company, or a governmental agency, to spend today for what you might get tomorrow. We should be balancing the budget, trying to maintain some reasonable reserves for those things that we can't anticipate and for those days when they just aren't as good. And if we're pleasantly surprised by it being better, then we're pleasantly surprised and we can spend the money. But the path we're on is going to mean it's going to be really, really painful if we don't do something now. And we keep voting for this darn budget, and I wish the board would say stop, pause, freeze, or do something now, rather than just kicking the can down the road year after year, going to negotiations and being disingenuous when there's really no money to be spent, and not addressing the issue that we have today. But again, we'll probably approve this thing and we'll go forward again, and we'll come every quarter. I hate this one. This is the meeting I hate the most. Because this budget keeps getting put in front of us, it never gets better. It keeps getting worse. And now we are on that 2-year time frame. Because the buffer we used to have is gone. We've spent it. We've spent it on prior expenses. We have one buffer left for one more year, and then we're in the 3%. And then other people start telling us how to run the district. Whether it's by directive or formal action, we lose control of this district. And so I'm not supportive of the budget. I've not been supportive of the budget. We need to stop. We need to be acting with some urgency and not just hoping that waiting until the next governor's meeting is going to look better. I know I say the same thing every time, but I think we're out of time.
Coming to understand this budget over the last year and a half, I am in agreement with Peter that we need to take a serious look at it, and we need to talk seriously about how we're going to manage. You know, this last round of educational workshops was very eye-opening for me, and I think it's time for the board study session where we really talk about how we're going to manage over time. Because I don't want to become a district where, you know, we heard our speaker earlier talk about, I moved here for the district. I moved here because I wanted to be in a place. And that was my stance 18 years ago. And I want to be able to continue that for the next generation of kids. And the way we're doing it now, we're not going to be done. And so now, like I said, as my understanding has grown, I feel like we can't move. I mean, I understand we have to certify the interim report tonight, but I think it's time for the serious discussions about programmatically and staffing-wise.
I agree too. I think it's time for a board study session on the budget. I don't think we wait until next spring for cuts for 17-18. I think we need to look at our 18-19. I think we need to be looking at what we can do now. We have to, it's not okay to be going to the end of the school year and wisdom. We couldn't and wouldn't do that at home, and I don't think it's okay, and I don't think it's fair to our students. I don't think it's fair to our staff. I don't think it's fair to our community. I think we need to look at some things like that. I'd rather have this discussion now instead of being another community down the freeway. It's having major discussions about how to deal with $10 million. I think it would behoove us to get going.
Would there be any interest in doing what Vallejo did and appointing a budget advisory committee of community members, the chief operations officer, teachers? I just worry that one study session, this is really complex, and this just needs to be continued work. We have to really figure this out, and it just cannot wait for one meeting, and then the next meeting. It really need to know that it's almost as if it's like the bond money we have. It needs to be project managed, right? With progress reports and status reports, driving towards a balanced budget, hopefully building back our reserves to be ready for that day. Someday the economy is going to be in a recession, and the state of California is under-reserved itself. There was a study by Moody's Analytics that the state of California needs to weather a moderate recession, needs 10% reserves, and it's only holding 5% reserves. We're not ready. The state's not ready to help us. We're not ready to be go it alone. And so I would just recommend that we take this on, as Dr. Young said, to be analytical about it, not emotional, and view it as a project with some deliverables and timelines and milestones.
One of the questions I had for Dr. Beatson is, is this discussion part of the LCFF outreach? You know, we're talking about when we go out to talk to our community about what the priorities are, also what the potential cuts are, and what they're, you know, I don't know that we need another board. I don't know that we need another group if we can do it within our process of the LCFF discussions.
Yes, when we start having our stakeholder engagement, we will be looking at what has been working, what do we need to stop doing? What can we take out? But that is the actions and services. A lot of that comes from some one-time money as well. So that's one part of the conversation.
I guess I would like to say, oh, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, you start meeting soon, right?
Right after the first of the year.
So that could coincide with the fact that we're having a study session on our budget where we can really get in and look with it. So that would be good. Celeste, I'm sorry.
Oh, it's fine. So thank you, Mr. Rayhill, for the report. I guess I have a couple thoughts. One is that we're not alone as a district. There are many districts in the state that are facing really similar financial precariousness, and I mean, it has to do with obvious reasons I think that you've talked about tonight, in terms of funding and how we fund education in the state and in the country. And yeah, I honestly, I think this is urgent. I think we need to do something about it. Obviously, we're going to have to, and I don't imagine we wouldn't. I have complete faith that we are going to do what we need to do to keep the district solvent. It's heartbreaking to me to think of making cuts because it affects students, it affects staff, it affects teachers, it affects why we're all really here, which is for the learning of our kids, and for our community as a whole. And I personally find it really heartbreaking to know that that's on the horizon for us. And I think it's our responsibility when we're going through this process to do it, do it analytically, do it thoughtfully, and also hold the importance of our vulnerable populations in the district, and being really mindful of how we go about making the painful decisions that we're going to have to make. And I think, I definitely need a study session, for sure. A lot of this stuff is relatively new to me, and like trying to get through the report is daunting. So it'd be really helpful for me to have a better sense. And I think, and part of this too is I think there's so much, there's not predictability in what happens. The way education is funded in our state is so problematic because it's revenue based as a state. So you can't count on it. It can change at any moment. And I think that that's just part of what makes this so challenging, really, is that we don't know what's going to happen in terms of revenue and in terms of expenses. So anyhow.
Okay. So before I call for a motion, are there any other comments? And do I need to open it up for public comment? Because this is a vote, correct? So are there any last second comments? Otherwise, I'm going to open this up. Are there any comments from the public? Okay.
Lisa DeLorfus, Mary Farmer. I really like the idea of having a committee. I have actually asked for numerous documents from the district just for that purpose, to help find places we can cut. And I haven't received them yet, but I have asked for them because I also feel there are a lot of places. I have had numerous suggestions on ways we can cut. And I am going to volunteer to be on that committee because this is something I'm very passionate about. And I really think it is a needed thing for us to do because there is a problem. And I think there is a solution. People may not like the solution, but I think there is a solution. And I would really like to be a part of that.
Anybody else?
Hi, I'm going to talk as a parent and as someone who's currently bargaining. And my main issue is priorities. And what do you choose to spend your money on? And going into bargaining year after year when planning for teachers is, if we have any money left, you might be able to have some. When we are the essential of your budget. Like, we're your food in your house. We're not your gym membership, your cable TV, and your vacation. And so I would like us to have that priority in budget decisions. And I also have similar feelings about the bond. Like, I felt like I was sold something that was going to improve classroom situations for my children. And I haven't seen a single portable replaced. So I just question your priorities and what's actually at the center of what we're doing. Like, I'm kind of disappointed and feel weird that I don't know if I would vote for another bond as a teacher and a parent. That feels weird. And so to me, that raises a red flag that I'm like, what are our priorities? And it really needs to be about kids, and you don't cut in the classroom first. When the first cuts we've seen proposed are reducing teacher salaries and increasing class size, we're like, that's not fair. It has to start across the whole board. That's what we're asking for.
Bill Franchini, I spoke earlier. Boy, you're between a rock and a hard place, which I can remember as deja vu all over again. When your budget is 87%, as most school districts are, and you're tied up in your staff, it's hard to nibble away at at other things in the budget to get to the point where you need to be when you're talking about $1 million in cuts. That's a really tough nut to crack. Besides what I mentioned earlier, as at least a positive way, and the studies can be done at no cost to come in and see whether the district is even in a position to offer such a thing, I think is a step that you certainly could take. There's no cost to you to have them do an analysis of whichever firm you want to go with, or both for that matter. We used to do both, and then see who offered a better deal. But as the previous speakers have said, you can't, without getting to class sizes or the number of days in the year, the professional development days. I mean, we used to have at least some flexibility there, but it was a tough sell to bargaining units to reduce days, because you're reducing the salary by the same. Reduce one day is 180th of a salary. And the permit kids issue is another interesting one. I was glad to hear what she said about the fact that when you look at the permit kids, that really they're on the high end of the spectrum rather than really changing the culture of the district. But then you get into how high can we go? Where's space available, or do we make space available, is an issue. You also are up against another timeline, which I didn't hear get mentioned, that if you're going to go for any type of reductions in staffing, that other than where your turnover might be and you have temporaries in place that you release, there's a May 1st deadline still for layoff notices, which you also have to think about. So as I say, one other positive that we worked on, I can't give you the details of that, but I'm sure the superintendent could talk to the district where I used to work, is a distant learning program, where you actually enroll kids outside of the district through computers and so on, and you actually are charging them money, and they get the Benicia name on their diploma when they eventually graduate. And that means something, because you have excellent schools. But it takes time to get a program like that going and up and running, but it could be something positive for the future. So I sympathize with what you're looking at. And if you want to have a retired person on any committee, I'd be happy to serve.
I make a motion to approve the interim financial report. Take a second.
Oh, I'll second that. Sorry, I thought you just said it.
Thank you. Sorry, I should
I'm deep in thought. Sorry, I'll second that.
Is this a roll call or is this regular vote? All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed?
No.
Yeah.
So thank you for having us. We are excited actually to be here and present some first trimester updates on our LCAP. We have started doing this last year and we're going to continue throughout this year. So tonight we're hoping to to do three things. And we're going to try to go pretty quickly through the first part because we've gone through some of this before. But to understand the progress monitoring on the LCAP strategic plan goals, actions, and our local data. And then the second half, and Trustee Ferrucci alluded to this earlier, to look at our state accountability, which is now have been publicly released, and share that with you as well. And we are excited because while we're not where we want to be, we're moving in the right direction. And so that's really, really exciting for us. Because our district vision, where all students achieve the highest potential in their engaging, inspiring, and challenging learning environments and drive everything we do, we thought it was important to start this strategic plan conversation and how we're doing with keeping that in mind. And we have a lot lately been looking at our beliefs and our desired characteristics and matching them to our programs. And how are we doing to continue to foster graduates who look like the students that we've described here. And so I sort of think of the district vision as the top of a big funnel, and then the next piece, just to remind us that we have two wildly important goals, our WIGs, that we've been working on, and they both revolve around culture. One is student culture, about relationships and achievement and aspirations and heart, and then the other is staff culture, and that's something we're continually working on, because what we believe is when we can continually improve those, all aspects of our organization, including student achievement, will continue to rise.
Just a reminder, with our LCAP, we have 3 goals. And the first goal focuses on the BUSD staff, supporting our students academically, social-emotionally, and preparing them for college and career. Goal 2's overarching focus is on 21st century teaching and learning. And goal 3 focuses on engaging our parents and community in our district. With our LCAP goals and actions, we constantly progress monitor, and some of the highlights, I'm not going to go into detail because we've shared them with you in the past, but we have expanded our CTE pathways and our implementation of NGSS. What we're working on opening up right now is 2 progress monitoring documents. And one of the documents, one of the documents is, I'll start with that one. All right, this document here.
Way to be.
Okay. This document here is a progress monitoring tool. The first columns you're seeing are our annual targets, and on the right are the results, so how we actually measured with each goal. So we're constantly adding to this because when we get our CASP data, that doesn't always align to when we're reporting out on our LCAP goals. So it's lag data. So this is where we're constantly updating and progress monitoring.
I have a hard copy of this. That's the other document that's linked. We started this last year, and this has every single action that we have in our LCAP. And so it's a way for us to track using a red, yellow, and green color coding system of where we are. Red means we have not started implementation, or we've decided not to. Yellow is it's in progress, and green is fully implemented. And so this has been a really helpful tool in that. And then the top part has our measurable outcomes, and that's what's on the document that Stephanie had just showed us as well. And those are all part of our LCAP, and that's the data. And again, much of this is lag data, so we don't get the final results until the end of the year or sometimes even the beginning of next school year. But this is where we are right now. We're not going to go through all of it, but we will pull out a few highlights to share with you.
Thank you.
Also with the highlights, again, I'm not going to go through everything, but one thing I wanted to point out is some of the organizational shifts, such as the teaming at the middle school, such as I wanted to point out access period at the high school as our students inquired about, and just to let all the students know that on Wednesday and Thursday they will have access period between their 2 finals. I did check in with Ms. Kleinschmidt, and it was in their news note and on the website, but she will make sure she says something tomorrow so that they're all clear. All right, so on to our local data. Along with our CASP data, that's one measure, we also, as a district, monitor locally. And before I go into our EL story, I just wanted to give 2 things. Before we talk about data, sometimes data can be uncomfortable. And I just want to reiterate that I do appreciate this team pointing out all the fabulous work going on, because I know when you walk the classrooms, you know that there's intense, rigorous learning and really hardworking teachers. So when we're looking at this data, we definitely want to analyze what is working and the positives. But as educators, we also like to take that next step and see what else we can do for our students. And on a second note, myself being new to coordinator of education, my 2nd month in, I have already started analyzing things that I'm doing. And in this process, with collecting local data, how it goes is teachers do the assessment, they input scores, and then educational services pulls that data, creates charts, organizes it, analyzes it, and then in turn, we return it and have conversations with site administration, and then they then pass it back on to their teachers so they can further analyze it. Now, in reflecting upon this, our teachers give assessments at different times. It's when the needs arise for where the students are. We report on it trimesterally, according to reflecting on our LCAP and sharing with you. So a new goal for Ed Services is going to be, we've already worked with site administration. We have the dates of when assessments from the teachers are going to be administered. And instead of compiling all the data at the same time, due to when we're going to present it, we are going to then compile it as soon as the teachers input it and administer it, return it, so it's much more lead data versus lag data, and that way we can in turn support our teachers in this. So that's just a reflection I wanted to share with you. All right, the local data story for EL. Some things you'll see in this data are, for ELA, the results are our 1st through 11th grade students. We've made gains in consistency in the administration of the assessment. We also have identified how our 4 student groups are doing in our local data. And the performance gap identified in CASP, we've also found evident in our local data. And the 4 student groups were our African American students, our EL students, our students with disabilities, and our socioeconomically disadvantaged students. What we'll see in math is you'll see results for K-12 in math. In the high school level, the results are dependent upon what math course they're in, not what grade. Now we're looking at the 1st grade reading 1st trimester benchmark, and they use a tool called DRA, which is Developmental Reading Assessment. It measures decoding fluency and comprehension. It's done in a 4-point rubric, and we have approximately 68% of our students that are at or above proficiency. We then took the data and we broke it down and identified how our 4 student groups were doing that we are keeping a close eye on. And as you can see, the EL students and African American student groups are very similar in comparison with our overall in 1st grade. But a noticeable difference is our student with disabilities have a significant learning gap compared to our overall.
So SW, you mean?
Students with disabilities. socioeconomically disadvantaged. You need a degree in acronyms, I
For
know.
us lay people, yes.
Then the next chart is representing our 2nd through 5th grade reading overall in their first trimester. They use the tool F&P, which is Fontes and Pinnell, and aligns with our workshop model. It also measures fluency and comprehension. And overall, meeting and exceeding standards were above the 70th percentile. And we've shown an increase from 1st through 2nd grade. So if you're wanting to dig deeper and see this data by specific grade, we've provided that to you as well. When we look at our 2nd through 5th grade reading students, our English language learners, our African Americans, our students with disabilities, and our socioeconomically disadvantaged, you see that the achievement gap has increased in 2nd through 5th grade. For BMS ELA, it was our 6th through 8th graders assessed. Now this chart looks a little bit different. You see 3 rubrics, green being above standard, yellow measuring at or near, and red being below. This is because they gave an interim assessment, also known as an IAB, which mirrors the questions that the students see on the CASP. And above 80% are in the yellow or green, and their focus was on editing and revising, another strand from CASP. When we look at our BMS ELA student groups, the gap is increasing for our 4 significant groups. So again, that's something that we are providing this back with our administrators and our teachers, and this is a conversation that we're digging into so that we can make a difference. In BHS, they also gave an interim assessment. This is 9th through 11th grade, and their focus was on reading and language and vocabulary, and over 80% are in the yellow and green. Again, there's a significant disparity of achievement amongst our identified student groups. And now we're into math. Math for was tested K-5, and there was an increased inconsistency across all the sites in mathematics with an 85% proficiency rate. Now, across the state of California, for CASP, it was identified that in 3rd grade, they found CASP to be either flat or declining for 3rd grade. What we noticed in our local data that there was a decline going from 2nd grade to 3rd grade, both in cohort and in grade bands. So that is something in turn we're going to look into program-wise, and also getting feedback deeper from our teachers to see what areas they feel that aren't aligning.
Test themselves. So how do you, when you do this analysis, find causation? So it can be something about our curriculum or our students, but it couldn't also be something about the test itself. And how do you get to that? Yeah.
Many levels. So that's a good point. We just had for elementary content collaboration days, and that was an item of discussion on one of the assessments that the team came together and discussed, that there were certain questions that they did not feel were weren't fair in the way they were asking or what they were getting to. So we discussed that. We made some changes. So there was multi-levels right now, and we're still, some of this data was just inputted the beginning of this week. So we're still neck deep in data, to be perfectly honest with you. But it's a lot of analyzing, going back, looking for trends, looking how cohorts are doing over time, from grade level to grade level, just as a whole. And then now noticing this difference between 2nd and 3rd grade. okay, our math overall is doing well in elementary, but what is going on here? So now that next step is going to be actually digging into the program. And then in turn, talking with teachers. What are they seeing at the end of second grade? What are the strengths? What are the struggles? And then what are incoming third grade teachers seeing? And then again, it's going to be looking at CASP data for third grade and seeing what the struggles or deficiencies are. So then we can see if it's program. It's just multifaceted. So we are digging through for sure.
Stephanie, is there also a thread? We're doing everyday math, correct?
Correct.
Is there a thread that gives students an opportunity to respond using technology between second and third? I know third grade, it's a requirement on the test, but getting there, is that part of the program, or is that something that needs to be discussed?
There is a piece of the program. So there's mathematical games online. The students can actually answer the test questions online. One thing we've spoken as a team of educators is there's something called the toolkit. So we're encouraging teachers to let students explore. It's, creating graphs, or in first and second grade, it's playing with shapes and just manipulating and how to use different tools, so that when you're in third grade and you get to CASP and you get to use the tool center, it's not a toy, it actually is a tool. So there is that component. And then some other teachers are also, expanding the technology piece using things such as like Seesaw, et cetera, that they're actually recording or their work via technology, but that's not part of the math program.
I'm asking because I've been walking around to some of our classes and I'm seeing more and more students on the Chromebooks.
Oh, definitely.
And I know that can be pretty intimidating if you're not, it's not so much the computer, it's what the computer can do to help you to do the test. So that's a whole different level of learning versus, just being a pointer kind of typist. So that's, I'm just kind of curious.
I agree, and that is something that we have discussed. And I can't recall which grade, but we did have that conversation. And the teacher's response was that it wasn't such an obstacle anymore. I remember a few years ago, it was like huge obstacle. And now it's second nature because most all teachers are using it quite often throughout the day. You're welcome. So again, this is K-5 student group. In elementary math, you notice there's not a significant gap in achievement. When you look at our overall versus our EL versus African American, there is a gap, but it's not as significant. But our students with disabilities still have the largest achievement gap in this grade band. For BMS, we have 6th through 8th. They gave an assessment called the MDTP, another acronym, Mathematics Diagnostic Testing Project, and this is through UC Davis. What we noticed through our analysis is this test really aligns with the data in CASP. The scores, as we look back over time, it's almost identical. So it definitely is a good tool to measure. And now we need to see what's working and what we can build on. And also to point out, like I was talking about, analyzing the data and in return, returning it to teachers. One thing that's already started happening is the 6th grade team, BMS for math, has already started, they've used a collaboration day with their data. And they have analyzed the strengths, identified gaps, and also have found ways to address and adjust some of the curriculum to meet the needs. So that's already starting. And again, like in ELA, in middle school, the achievement gap seems to jump for our 4 student groups. In high school, again, like I said, the students are in integrated 1. We measured integrated 1, integrated 2, or integrated 3, so it's a mix of grades. It depends on the course. They did an interim assessment, a 3-point rubric, focusing on algebra and functions and trigonometry, again, mirroring what's on the CASP. And they had a 68% near to above standard. Sure.
The reason when you do the interim and it's only a small portion of the test, the test won't say you're at, or am I stealing your thunder? Let me get to that. They do an at or near. They will never say you're at because of standard error of measure. There's not enough questions to definitively say you're at. And I saw a visual the other day where it was somebody on a bicycle, and your front tire was at, but your rear tire was just over the line and near, and so it can shift either way. So they give you only an at or near. That makes sense.
That standard deviation of error. So again, then we look at our student groups. There are significant gaps, and in high school, we're looking at our ELL students being the most significant. Although in this data pool, the number of students with disabilities assessed was low. So that's something we're also looking into.
So that's our local data. And we want to make sure as much as possible our local data is predictive of how students are going to do on the CASP. And this is our progress monitoring, even though as we talked before, Trustee Morgan, oftentimes it's still lag data because we've taught it, then we give an assessment. This is the data that we bring to you, but teachers constantly are doing their right in time formative assessments to make adjustments on the fly. So now we're going to switch a little bit, but it's still all of it in our LCAP, to the California dashboard, which is our new accountability model. And this is based on the 8 priorities that the state tells us, they give us feedback in, the academic indicators for English and mathematics, chronic absenteeism, graduation rate, suspension rate, and then the new college and career indicator. I brought this to you last year. It was a brand new model. It's called the 5x5. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but because remember, this is not percentage met or exceeded. This places our schools and our student groups on this color grid by what they call the distance from 3, meaning they take the average scale score for every, say, 3rd grader, and they find out what was the lowest scale score you had to get a 3, which is meeting the standard. And then they place the rest of the groups based on if you were above 3 or below 3 and how much. This is also based on something called status and change. So on the left column is how you perform in the current year's assessment. So that's your status. And then they look across the top, and that's the change, and they compare, did you move up, did you stay the same, or did you go down from the current year's assessment? And that's how they find your place on the grid. Does that make sense? And our goal is to get to green. Our goal is really to get to blue, but green is meeting the standard. Blue is exceeding, it's extremely high. And I think I just talked about all of this. We only get the color grids if we have a student group of 30 or more. And technical assistance, which I believe they now call differentiated instruction, it used to be called program improvement, is student groups, so it goes all the way down to student groups, have to have a red in 2 or more of the indicator areas for 2 or more years. And we are not in any technical assistance, which is good news. So when you log on to the California dashboard, and I put the link right at the bottom of this slide for you, it's kind of like rabbit holes because you can click on many, many things and look at things in many different directions. This is our overall snapshot of our district. And so you can see we have lots of greens, we have a blue, we have a yellow in English language arts, and a green in mathematics. So that's overall for our district. We're in really good shape. On any of those links, you can click on them, and what will happen is you'll be able to see it by student group, because remember, the state measures how we do by all students for all of those 8 indicators, and then through the lens of every one of those student groups. So here's our greatest progress. And I tried to do some color coding for you, so it was a visual. In math, overall, for the district, we performed high, and we maintained or increased in 13 out of the 14 student groups. So we're not where we want to be. We still have lots of room to grow, but we are moving in the right direction, and that's really exciting news. in
Dr. Peterson, how did we get 14 student groups? All of a sudden, we've been talking about the 4 categories.
I'm sorry, good question, thank you. There are 14 student groups total because there's lots of different ethnicities. We are focusing in our district on the 4 of those 14 that have a huge achievement gap. Okay. In English language arts, we are yellow, which is a medium, and we've maintained or increased in 7 out of 14 of those student groups. Graduation rate, blue, we're very high. Suspensions are green. This is the only one area you want to be low in, and you want to decrease in. So we have maintained and decreased in 11 out of the 14 student groups for suspensions for our district, and our English learner progress is green. So those are some great celebrations. Areas of need, and I color-coded this again. And these, I want to have a caveat that just says, even though we have some oranges up there, many of them were red last year. And I just got clarification from the state today, this afternoon, because of the way they label the dashboard when you click. It doesn't give you the testing year. It only says the report release year. And so it was very difficult for us to get an accurate statement from the state that said, when it said spring 2017, it was really the testing year of 2015-16, which it was. And then fall 2017 release was last year's testing year. So what I want to bring back to you is kind of a color chart that shows where were we in 15-16 and where are we in 16-17, but I wanted clarification from them because they don't label the testing year on it. So that was feedback we gave them. It says this is going to get very confusing if you only write the release of the report and not the date of the testing year. So anyway, we had many reds last year, and so we're moving. We want to be out of orange, but we are moving in the right direction, and people are working really hard for that. So overall areas you can see up there, our student groups are showing up over and over again, and that's the focus of the work that we're all doing. A new student group that has come this year is a homeless. We have never gotten a report on homeless students before. They hadn't reported on them, and so that is a group that we're paying attention to. And please remember, for funding purposes, it's unduplicated, so we get $1, if you will, for the students. They only count once, but for accountability purposes, students will count in as many categories as they fit in. New this year, we did not have this last year. They just released this, and it's not in a color-coded dashboard yet because we only have the status. They don't have change because we haven't had 2 years of this, which is chronic absenteeism, and that's defined as a student being absent 10% of the days we've been in school, okay? And so our chronic absenteeism is higher than we want it to be. It's 8.1%. However, we are lower than the state and much lower than Solano County. It was very interesting to me to see how high chronic absenteeism is in the state. No, not at all. And I will tell you that Zachary Pless, Mr. Pless, is tracking it weekly, and he has weekly meetings and color-coded charts and is having parents in and meetings to really change that. And I don't have the data right here in front of me, but it's not this low already this year. Community Day, yeah. I think he's tracking them as well. Yep. And so then I'm not going to read through each of these, but I did this analysis by each site as well. And you can see, and I also linked each school's dashboard to each slide so that if you wanted to go in and look closer at each one. So again, we have lots to have great progress for, and the areas of need, though we are growing. I mean, those are going up, we still want them to go up further. And so you can see we've got greens and yellows in suspension, so they're working on that. That's been an area of focus. Mary Farmer, awesome job. Greens and blues. So congratulations, everyone. That's your overall student population. And again, we're still looking at the gaps because I don't know if you remember a couple of meetings ago when we brought the percentage data to you, we showed you the it was a blue and red chart, I believe, that showed the gap. And so we still have the achievement gap in those 4 student groups. And that's across the entire district. And in fact, it's we're having the conversations at the county, same gaps. We're doing a problem of practice, and we're going to look at a particular student group and really focus on that. Joe Henderson, great news, lots of greens, lots of blues, good work here. Robert Semple, again, and if you remember a few years ago, we didn't have reds and yellows and blues, but we had really struggling performance, and that performance is really moving in the right direction. And I don't want to try to switch back and forth to the grid, the 5x5, but if you look at their movement on those grids, it's really powerful. Yeah, we're starting to have those conversations right now, for sure. In fact, and I was going to save this for the end, but one of the things that we did was we took and are working with the principals, we've identified who all the students are that are falling in those groups. They're in turn working with their teachers. They're identifying how are we going to continue to progress monitor at the classroom level? What are some strategies? We've had conversations just this afternoon and yesterday with PAR and DCC about professional development and how can we continue to look at this as a focus and learn more. Benicia Middle School, some great growth here, both in English language arts and math and suspensions. And so suspensions are in orange for last year. There's already, through the PBIS, the Positive Behavior Intervention Support Systems, they have a whole data management system called SWIS, lots of more acronyms, where they track suspensions, and Mr. Scott shared that with us today. And so even responding to this before we knew what this looked like, it's already greatly improved, and teachers are doing a whole lot to find alternatives to suspensions, things such as mindful mornings, increased after-school activities, and paying real close attention to that. But there has been growth in both, and you can see they don't have a whole lot of student groups, not as much disparity in those student groups. And Benicia High School. In Benicia High School's data, you're not going to see separate ELA and math because that rolls into the new college and career indicator, okay? So suspensions are great, except for the homeless population and graduation rates, and then we have a couple of student groups that we're really paying attention to because they're being they have more suspensions than everyone else. College and career indicator. I didn't bring a copy of this, but I don't know if you recall the way the state determines if you are college and career ready is a lot. There's many different avenues to do this, and I should have brought a copy, and I apologize. I can get one out to you. You can pass 2 AP classes. You can get a 3 on both of the 2 assessments. You can get a 3 on one assessment and a 2 on the other. Do you remember that? There was buttons across. So they've looked at all of those and determined that 46.9% of our students last year graduated college and career ready by that, by meeting one of those buttons on that chart. And you can see we have, again, our student groups disproportionately not. And so that's something that we're focusing on. And we actually, as we started having conversations with staff and parents and students, recently we brought that indicator forward and said, look at some different pathways. Let's think creatively about how we can encourage students and our staff to look at this. And CTE pathways is another one of the buttons, which is great. And as we grow that program, we will continue to grow this. So next steps, just quickly, I talked a little bit about monthly monitoring of student progress. So every month I meet with the principals. I bring the student data. They show with their student data. They're in turn meeting with the teachers. And if they haven't yet, that's their plan for their next staff meeting. It's in all the site plans goals. All the principals have it as goals. Stephanie and I have personal goals in this. We do monthly site plan updates at an administrative council. We bring this data to every committee that we're working with. And so DCC is District Curriculum Council, when we meet with our coaches, the reading specialist departments, so that we're getting that input to do exactly what you had said. What are we doing? What's working? What's not working? What else can we do? And then a really great new thing that's happening is our coach, Lisa Golson, who's our math coach at the middle school, has reached out to 5th grade teachers and has bridged and gone and done some co-teaching at the 5th grade level to really get to know that program. And so she's going to be bringing other 6th grade math teachers to do that. And then in talking at the high school with some teachers, Coach T said, I want to do that. So we're going to start to bridge that so that the 9th grade teachers can go to 8th grade and really see what is that program, so that we can make sure that there's not any gaps in alignment and vertical articulation. So, any questions? Thank you. Well, thank you. It is exciting. It's good. It's the right work.
Stephanie, I've heard through the grapevine how hard.
Thank you for articulating this in a way that's understandable, because it's a challenging set of measurements to put together.
Absolutely great.
Well, I did 2 workshops on it at CSBA to try and get a good handle on it, and so thank you for pulling it all together.
Okay, I think we finally did, or we're at the end of our meeting. Before we end, what I would like to do, this is our last meeting of the year, so I would just like to extend my thanks to everyone. Both my board colleagues, I think you are amazing to work with, and I really appreciate you, and to our administrative staff, you are the best. And also to our students, our parents, and our teachers, you are amazing, and we really are very grateful that you're doing what you're doing. And I wish you a wonderful, wonderful, healthy holiday break. Enjoy yourself, come back, replenish so we can hit the ground again. But I want to say thank you and have a wonderful holiday season. And with that, do I have a motion to adjourn? Well, we don't have to do that. We just adjourn. I just hit the gavel. We are adjourned.